when you have a base, whether it is a vibrant farming lobby of small farmers or small fishermen, or a vibrant labor movement, when you are rooted, you have sites of resistance, you have power, and you can resist. Part of why we've seen this model of protest is because a lot of those bases have been eroded, whether it's the attack on small farmers and many people who are living on the land moving to cities, whether it's gentrification causing a huge amount of mobility within cities, or whether it's the erosion of the workplace and the rise of temporary labor. We don't actually have these stable institutions where we can resist in the usual ways. And for that reason, these symbolic protests, those protests outside the meetings, have become extremely important. And I think they're going to continue to be important, even though it's possible that they will enjoy less public support, because in a climate of fear, just generally anything that seems in any way to be a threat to public order is if the police crack down on that. I mean, speaking personally, we were doing a lot of work on the right to protest before September the 11th. This was happening in Canada because we hosted the Summit of the Americas in Quebec City, and the government built a fence around most of the city, and we were able to organize academics, artists, even some journalists, to defend the right to freedom of assembly, to the right to use public streets as a site of resistance. Post-September the 11th, it's a lot harder to mobilize that kind of mainstream support because people are so fearful. And when people are fearful, what the reflexive mode is to trust authority, right? To believe that you can trust the police, that you can trust your politicians. And it's fear is infantilizing. And an infantilizing process leads us to trust authority even against our better judgment. So I guess this is kind of I don't think there is a yes-no answer to the question of whether or not we can continue to have these types of protests. I think we are going to continue to have these types of protests. We need to do it all the more because of the laws that are being passed saying we can't. Now, to not protest outside a G8 summit, in a sense, is to give in to the laws that are being written and rammed through that say actually to protest outside of a G8 summit is terrorism. So I don't think that we have the choice in some ways. But the other thing is that we need to get at the deeper issue of how do we build rooted movements. And I don't think you can talk about that without talking about how you build community, sustainable community, and how you think about what power means now that some of the traditional models of building power bases are in decline. Well, in a postmodern, hypermobile, rootless society, where are our new roots? Where are our new communities? Where do we get our power? And I don't. I have the questions, but I actually don't really have the answers. I know that there's a really powerful, renewed interest in local democracy and participatory democracy, and looking at cities and towns, municipalities as potential sites of resistance and more direct forms of democracy. And I think that's quite encouraging. But this is very early stages. But I think that that's the seeds of the new movement, which is a much more decentralized but networked model of a movement that is less focused on the mass convergences and more rooted.